Are the scriptures still relevant today to the needs of mankind? And if so, can we look to the scriptures for answers to the scientific and medical solutions? For example, can we look to the scriptures for answers as to how to deal with the transformational challenges brought on by COVID-19? These are the issues and more that we will be looking at in this segment as I share 7 reasons why the scriptures can be trusted as a sound reference for dealing with the medical challenges associated with COVID-19. Very extensive training, and I hope that you will be plugged in for it. As I said, that I'm doing this first part absolutely free, but then the other episodes will only be available through our membership platform. So I encourage persons to go on over and to get registered as soon as possible. All right, so let's get into it. Now, these are some points that I want to make note of. Now, one of them is that the body knows no virus, bacteria, or pathogen by name. And so we're going to be looking at the natural response, but I want persons to understand that even though we know that there is a pathogen behind it, the body doesn't know any bacteria, it doesn't know any disease by name or any labels. These labels exist outside the body, and so really and truly you don't have to fear. What the body knows is what it is designed to do, and that is to heal and to protect itself. COVID-19 is particularly dangerous to persons who have already underlying health conditions, and so that is a fact. A lot of persons that we are seeing that are dying are persons who have underlying health conditions, and so persons who are healthy become dangerous to persons who have underlying health conditions, or they become carriers. And so what we are saying is that we want persons to boost their immune system so that if they, in a worst case scenario, if it is that you contract COVID-19, you may just be a carrier and not be a victim of its ravishing effect. So the most appropriate approach to COVID-19 basically is to boost the immune system. And in order to boost the immune system, then you have to get rid of the mucus that is there. And so over the years, modern man has tried to prove that the scripture is irrelevant and that it is non-applicable to mankind's ever-existing needs. Scientists have advocated that science and scriptures are irreconcilable, with the scriptures being archaic, and that it is unsound, that it is impractical and not scientific enough to be depended upon for guidance as it relates to the health needs of man. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today is I'm going to share with you the scriptural rules of engagement. How do you approach COVID-19 from a scriptural perspective? So in light of the in light of the fact that COVID-19 has become as widespread as it is, my goal is to present, in my opinion, as a traditional naturopath and as a student of the scripture, what is the natural and spiritual response to COVID-19. All right, so that is my goal. My goal is to present, in my opinion, as a traditional natural health practitioner and as a student of the scripture, what is the natural and spiritual response to COVID-19. All right, so and I believe that the scripture is qualified. I believe the scripture is qualified to deal with this this question, to deal with this issue. And as a matter of fact, here are 7 reasons why the scripture can be trusted as a sound scientific source of reference to deal with COVID-19. Number 1, the scripture establishes symptoms and diagnosis in firm science. So the scriptural approach describes a scientific method rather than a superstitious approach at a time when microscopic organisms were unheard of. So today I'm going to share with you the scriptural approach, and one of the reasons why I believe so far the scripture can be trusted as a sound scientific source of reference to deal with COVID-19 is number one. The scriptural approach describes a scientific method rather than a superstitious approach at a time when microscopic organisms were unheard of. So, you know, in a time when bacteria wasn't known, or pathogens weren't known, or microscopic organisms weren't known, because all that came about around about in the 1800s. And so, even without the aid of microscope or any type of medical devices, the scriptural approach to contagious infection, the scriptural approach, the description that the scripture gives is very supportive, and it is very based. The approach was more scientific. You know, if you study nearly any other religion or any other belief system out there, back in the olden days when persons had certain type of ailments, there were a whole lot of superstitions surrounding it, and rather than approaching it superstitiously, the scripture has a very scientific approach. And so the scripture establishes symptoms and diagnosis that are rooted in firm science. We're going to be going into that in the scripture. All right, let me just, all right. Number two, the scripture establishes periods of 7-day quarantine. According to Leviticus 13, verse 4 to 5, you know, in terms of dealing with contagious infection, the scripture establishes periods of 7-day quarantine. Now, this was at a time when bacteria was unheard of or unknown. Number three, the scripture underscores the fact that body fluids was a means of transmittance. At a time when there was no science to support the fact that microscopic pathogens existed. As a matter of fact, in those times, science was based on what we call bad air. So it was the belief scientifically that when persons got sick, it was the result of bad air or noxious fumes. Number four, the scripture establishes a regular washing protocol. So for persons who had infection, the scripture establishes a frequent washing protocol that would minimize the spread of infection or the spread of that particular pathogen. Number five, the scripture insists on wearing a face mask and other protective clothing in Leviticus 23 verse 45. So in Leviticus 23 verse 45, as it relates to dealing with infectious contagious diseases, the scripture insists on wearing face masks. And so far, all of what the scripture has recommended as it relates to dealing with infectious diseases is pretty much what we're seeing in effect now. It is pretty much what mainstream health professionals are advising persons. It's just that there are some parts that they are leaving out, and that's what we're going to be going into today. All right, number six, the scripture gives the herbal remedies that are backed in science. And so, yes, today I'm going to be sharing with you some herbal remedies for COVID-19. Again, I'm going to be sharing with you some herbal remedies for COVID-19 that is found in the scriptures. And then number seven, all instructions pertaining to dealing with the conditions came from the Creator himself. So these are 7 reasons why I believe the scripture can be trusted as a sound scientific source of reference to deal with COVID-19. All right. Now, in the scriptures, you won't see the name COVID-19, of course. You won't see the name COVID-19. What you will see the scripture talking about is infectious, contagious diseases or infectious conditions that fall under the name leprosy. Now, the scriptural definition of leprosy is not necessarily referring to the leprosy that we now know, or modern day leprosy, which is also known as Hansen's disease, which is a chronic infectious disease caused by a microbacterium. So when the scripture talks about leprosy, it is not necessarily referring to the modern day leprosy that is now known as Hansen's disease. As a matter of fact, leprosy in the scripture refers to a number of contagious infections that may even affect inanimate objects, such as a house, for example. And you can see that in Leviticus 14, verses 33 to 35. So in Leviticus 33 to 35, it refers to a house having leprosy. Again, leprosy is not referring to the leprosy of modern day, which is also known as Hansen's disease. But leprosy is a term, is a word that was used to describe a wide variety of contagious infections that range from maybe eczema, that wasn't eczema conditions, to maybe Hansen's disease. But it wasn't talking about the modern day leprosy that is now called Hansen's disease. All right. So it was a term. It was a broad term used to describe contagious, infectious conditions. All right. So just wanted to clarify that.